In reference to my work, at times I am asked, where did I pick the lessons that I have applied in the last 2 decades of my life? And my answer is that the lessons that I have applied in the last 2 decades of my life are actually the lessons that were supplied by the first 2 decades of my life. Yes, lessons I learned while growing up in an Indian middle class neighborhood. And these lessons have served me well in all domains, in all aspects, in all circumstances, and in all stages of life. The scope, the relevance of these lessons, they go much beyond the constraints of time and space. And today, I'm here to talk about 4 such life lessons. But you must be wondering, because I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. Instead, I have a box here. And in that box, we have 4 props. Each prop represents that lesson symbolically. So, let's begin. This is my first prop. I think a few of you guessed it right. It is a piggy bank. In our part of the world, we call it gullak. And in comparison to the modern versions of piggy bank, there is a difference. In fact, there are 2. A, it is made up of clay. And second, though it has on the top an opening from where you can put the currency notes, there is no flap to take it out. So, the only way you can take the contents of this gullak out is by breaking it. A heartbreaking and devastating proposition for a child back then. But by the virtue of this, all children back then developed 2 virtues. A, patience. Patience to wait till there is enough there. And B, discretion. Discretion to decide whether the reason for which you want to break this is actually worth it or not. So much before I heard about great psychologist Walter Mischel's work at Stanford called Marshmallow Experiment on instant and delayed gratification, I already had my first lesson. And that lesson was, patience is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Well, sample this. I often tell people that back then, our house, well, the interior was not done by some decorator or designer. It was done by the dates on the calendar. Yes, my parents bought and brought everything of significance, whether it is a television or a cooler or a refrigerator or a cassette player on a birthday, anniversary, or some festival. There was no random buying. There was no random buying. So, just imagine, I'm talking to my dad and I'm saying, Dad, I want a bicycle. And he says, great, this Diwali, you'll have a bicycle. Come on, this is March. Diwali will come in October or November, 7 months away. And still I would be happy. Why? Because I would have discovered 2 pleasures. A, the pleasure of accomplishment that will happen in October. But then, pleasure of anticipation that will actually go on for next 7 months. And that was much before, as a psychologist, I figured out that there is a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which gets secreted not only when you accomplish something, but also in the anticipation of a reward. Great lesson, isn't it? Well, that was first. What do we have for second? So second, I have this. A plate with crocheted cloth on it. And this crocheted cloth covered plate that we call Thali, you would find back then in hand of almost every kid, and especially around a major festival like Diwali. So what was in it? Well, on every special occasion in India, for all religions, you'll always have delicious delicacies being made. So for Diwali, it would be gujia, anarse, shakarpare, khurme. There would be seon, there would be laddus, there would be everything. And then in the house, portion of each of them would be put on this plate. It would be covered by crocheted cloth, and then the kids of the house, mind it, not daughters, daughters and sons, both. They were supposed to take this to a house in the neighborhood. And then they would come back, fill it again, and then go to another house. Then come back, fill it again, go to the third one. But the best part was that when you would go there, then in case of the first recipient, the fascinating part was that this thali, this plate, would never come back empty. You know, because the recipient of this thali would actually then put portion of each of those delicacies made in their house into it. And in a way, you were exchanging happiness symbiotically. Ladies and gentlemen, from there, I learned my second life lesson, and that was that happiness is a collective concept fostered by collaboration. We think these days it's an individual construct. We think it's a personal pursuit. No, it's a collective concept fostered by collaboration. Sample this. You know what? Whenever there would be a function, a get-together at anybody's house, for instance, at mine, what would happen? I'll tell you what would happen. For instance, if we are hosting lunch for 60 people, there would be no maids to cook. There would be no waiters coming from a hired catering agency to arrange and serve. Instead, all the aunts and uncles would come. Aunts? No. There would be Didi, there would be Bhabhi, there would be Bua, there would be Chachi, there would be Tai, there would be Masi, there would be Mami. All of them coming together. And then all of them, along with my mom, would go into kitchen and they would cook food together. And mind it, they wouldn't feel they were deprived of the mainstream action. They would be laughing, they would be enjoying, they would be cracking jokes, gossiping, they would be singing songs. And once the food was prepared, then all the uncles, yes, the serving, the arranging would be done by all the uncles. Well, it would be, say, Bhaiya, or it would be Jija, it would be Masa, Mama, it would be Chacha, Tau, Fufa. I'm not sure about Fufa. But then, you never know. Fufa would one day. But jokes apart, uncles would do it. Before I realized as a psychologist, in a theory, I already knew one thing. That people come together and develop bonds, not by being together, but by doing something together, by building something together. It's not the shared experience that gets people together. It's shared effort. Well, that was the second lesson. What do we have for the third? I actually heard You know, this is a wool ball with two knitting needles. And you would find, back then, in 80s and 90s, you would find this in front of every kid, in the hand of grandma, mom, aunt, and at times in hand of a teacher in the classroom. You know, ladies and gentlemen, they would be knitting something. For days, weeks, months, across the year, they would be knitting socks. They would be knitting sweater, cardigan, wool hat. And they would be doing this in addition to their regular duties. And I learned something very important. My third lesson, progress. Yes, progress is about not only giving your best to your everyday endeavors, but always having a long-term project and devoting some time regularly to it. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, sample this. My book, 2 Paras of Everyday Wisdom, somebody asked me after it got published that you wrote a 350 plus page book, and I said no. It is actually a collection of my blog posts, select blog posts that I've been writing for more than 2 decades. And now, suddenly, it has all got added up and there is a book. So when I was writing a blog post, I was writing a page of that book. I was literally writing that book 1 page at a time. And it all adds up beautiful. But then, you know, there was another important concept to be derived from this lesson, and that was gestation period. What do you mean by gestation period? I'll give you an example. Whenever there would be a pickle being made, well, the method of making pickle in India and method of making pickle in West, they are different. So I'm talking about the Indian method. Whenever my grandma would actually make pickle, say a lemon pickle or a mango pickle, then all the contents, ingredients, oil, everything would be put in, and the jar would be actually put way beyond the reach of all the kids in the house. And then it is a forbidden fruit, and we all know how appealing it can be. So then what happens, every kid wants to reach out, but then you would get scolding from the grandma. And what would grandma say? Grandma would say, don't disturb it. The pickle is getting made. And then I would be mad. I would say, who is making pickle? And then my grandma would say, pickle is making itself. Amazing. You have to allow time to creation to create itself. That is called gestation. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all. We have last one. And what do we have for the last lesson? I don't know whether you can actually see it all, but I'm sure camera will capture it. There is a fresh new soap, and on the top of it, there is this chip of the old soap, enmeshed skillfully and meticulously, handcrafted. Ladies and gentlemen, you would always find it, specifically back then, in every washroom. Why? Because scarcity of resources made us respect resources. You know something? It's important for all of us to understand that fourth lesson that I learned back then. And that lesson was that, ladies and gentlemen, only the limitedness of resources inspires creativity and management. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is abundance of resources, people wouldn't respect resources. And that's why, to foster creativity and management, it's important to have limitedness of resources. And that was almost everywhere in our culture those days. So typically you would find Chyawanprash bottles being used as pen stands. They would not be pen stands, actually. Chyawanprash bottle would make for one. Then, whenever kids would play gully cricket with all strange kind of rules, for instance, the ball would go directly to Sharmaji's house, you're out. Because Sharmaji's had all the balls to not give the ball back, And that's why it is important for all of us to understand that at that time, even the space was scarce. So what would we do? We would put a stool for a wicket, for the stumps. What would we do? We would actually draw the stumps on the wall against which we were playing. The front wheel of the cycle would then become the stumps. And that would all happen, and we would be happy about it. But it is not all only for that. It went into other aspects, other facets of life as well. For every kid who was growing in 80s and 90s, one thing was inevitable. Invariably, you would wear clothes of your elder siblings, your elder cousins, and if you are lucky, some relatives in your extended family as well. And you would never feel that you were wearing second-hand clothes. You were never wearing worn clothes. You were happy about it. In fact, you would start booking your shirt already in advance. Because there were more siblings vying for the same shirt of an elder one. And ladies and gentlemen, we almost saw it as a legacy. We were never unhappy about it. And when extra guests would come at house, then you were supposed to go to neighbor's house and ask for crockery. You would not really have extra crockery because your neighbor has one. And you could do it all with all the right. Why? Because he would do the same. So much before I heard about collective resources, shared resources, cloud, we already had our cloud and clout over each other as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we talked about 4 lessons. First, patience is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. 2, happiness is a collective concept fostered by collaboration. Third, to progress, in addition to your everyday endeavors, always have a long-term project and devote some time regularly to it. And fourth, only the limitedness of resources inspires creativity and management. These extraordinary life lessons taught by my middle-class upbringing are there for you to try and then you'll witness the difference. Thank you.